Buenas tardes. Very good afternoon to everyone. This is Radio Culture Shock. I'm your host, faculty host, Nathaniel.
My name is Willie.
My name is Daniela.
And we are going to talk today about March 8th, which was last Friday. It is,
Right.
Today's what, the 12th?
Yeah.
Okay, so last week was International Women's Day, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. We have quite a bit of history. We have the usual Vox Populi, and we'll talk about, we have quite a bit of information about the International Women's Day, various themes from last year, from this year, and other important holidays or celebrations of women around the world. We're going to talk, and obviously, 50% of our society, right? Last week we discussed Zero Discrimination Day, right? So we're sort of continuing in that theme. But Willie, why don't you start us off with some of the history of the day?
Yeah, of course. Well, first, the idea of an International Women's Day was inspired by America's National Women's Day, February 28 in 1909, declared by the Social Party of America. So it was like the first day that this day was really important, not only for women, also for the world, because it's when, well, everything started to come with us like everyone, we are equal. Mm-hmm. And today, well, it's a really interesting program because one of our hosts is going to be one of our guests, Danny, because, well, the International Women's Day, we have to talk, with a woman to see experiences, to see some important facts. And, well, let's start with Danny. First, please tell us your name and, well, what are you studying right now?
Well, I am Daniela Macias. I am 21 years old. I am actually studying languages here at UPAEP, and I am a woman, basically.
Well, you're also taking a course online.
Yeah.
Are you not? And is it about feminism or is
No,
it about...
it's a little bit about culture, the United States and British culture.
Okay.
A little bit. So yeah, it kind of implies a little bit about civil rights movement or Vietnam War and also women's rights.
Okay. Yeah. So one important name from this history and in the early 1900s when National Women's Day in the United States was forming. So one important name from that is Charlotte Perkins Gilman, and she was an important figure. She was an author. She was an activist from that time, and addressed a crowd in one of these first rallies, right, saying, "It is true that a woman's duty is centered in her home and motherhood, but home should mean the whole country and not be confined to 3 or 4 rooms of a city or a state," right? And so the role, drawing a metaphor there, right? The rooms, the space that women occupy in society, right? 3 or 4 rooms, right, in a home, in a city, in a state, right? The role of women in society and being integrated in society. And it's also tied closely with the history of labor rights, right, and workers' rights. And so I would imagine, you must talk about labor and workers' movements in your class as well?
Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
What sorts of stuff have you discussed in your?
Well,
class?
basically we are a little bit more centered on the, Black Lives Matter, or the movement, the civil rights movement.
Okay.
But basically, the thing that we're seeing is that women, they had to leave, their works as a teacher or as any other, role that they developed in order to be at home taking care of, their husband and their kids. So, I think that's because the world was a little bit more dominated by men. So, where women wouldn't have access to a credit card or something because they were afraid that they would waste it, or, it's not like empowerment for women. And that, the 20th century, it was a little bit messy, so.
Okay. Yeah, and then we're dealing with a very sort of long history here, right? I mean, you mentioned credit cards, right? Those are a relatively recent invention.
Yeah.
But
Well, also it's important to say that this day, the March 8th, it's because, well, most of the people or too many people think that this is like a celebration. It's not a celebration itself, it's more a commemoration. And just as Danny said, just to commemorate the women that fight for their rights, to get paid for doing a job, to have the same rights as men. So as we can say, as the statement of Charlotte, this is a really powerful statement, and as we can see, and just as you said, it's really important because time ago, for example, in the 1540s, the women were not that empowered. So it was more men, and the power was in men, right?
Yeah.
And we want to talk. I mean, we mentioned that that the UN International Women's Day is inspired by the United States National Women's Day, right? This came about fully in 1975, right? In 1975 was declared the International Women's Year, right? And that's when the UN adopted March 8th, right, as the day to celebrate, to commemorate. I
Right.
think that's maybe a good way to put it, Willie. In International Women's Day, right? And then in 1977, right, the UN General Assembly adopted a resolution that proclaimed the women's right, a United Nations Day for women's rights and international peace to be observed, right, on any day, right, of the year by member states in accordance with their historical and national traditions. So I think there are sort of two things going on here, right? There's the international recognition of women, and then there's the support for local, more regional, country-specific celebrations of the day. And we have a few of those listed that we'll talk about maybe later in the show, but that's sort of the recognition of the different histories of different countries. Right?
And it's really interesting to see the important dates because, look, first it was in 1909, and it was just the recognition in North America, in the United States. So then look how many years later to women be recognized as an international day, right? It has to be really too many years later to be recognized as international until the 75, that it was by the United Nations in the 75.
Yeah, and we have, there are, we can look at the history of women's suffrage, right? And for our non-English speaking audience, do we know what suffrage means?
Yes.
Yes.
Sufrimiento.
Sufrimiento.
Yes.
So like suffering?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
right.
no.
No?
No, so that's and the words sound very similar, right? So
Yeah.
it's a tricky word in English, right? Right? Suffering, right? To suffer, right? Is, as you say, sufrimiento, right? To endure pain, right? Suffrage, right? SUFFRAGE is the right to vote, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So women's suffering, right, is different from women's suffrage, right? So we don't want to confuse those. We don't want to confuse those two words, right?
Yeah.
But that's as I think that's interesting, Willie, what you were saying, right? That it took, so these sort of beginnings in the early 1900s about women's role in society and demanding recognition and equal treatment under the law, right? Along with that comes the right to vote, right? And if you look at the timeline, right? Women, universal women's suffrage, so that all women, can vote as long as, whatever the voting age is in a country, right? That all women can vote universally, meaning regardless of belief or literacy or, some of these ways that governments prevent people from voting, right? takes a very long time to come about.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. So you see some of the earlier dates. The earliest being New Zealand in 1893. Right. Australia in 1902. Norway and Denmark in 1913, 1915. Sweden in 1919, and it's not until 1920, right, that you get the USA. And do we know when Mexico, when women got a full right to vote?
And 53.
Yeah.
That's a little bit late.
It seems a little bit late,
Yeah.
right? So there. I mean, but I think the point that Willie makes is really important, right? That things sort of take a while to come about, and change is sort of a slow process.
And in fact, well, nowadays that it's 2019, we could say that it's different, but it's not completely different. We have nowadays some facts, some things that we wouldn't like that happen with women. For example, Danny, you're as woman. Can you tell us if you have seen, or you feel that you have had a threat like just to be a woman, like a different threat?
Yeah, actually, when I was 18 years old, I met, my second boyfriend. And when I met his family, they were like, okay, so we're going to marry you. I only met him like that single day. And they wanted to marry me in exchange for some, I don't know, horses or something. So that to me was like, okay, so my job as a woman is to get married when I see a man and then have kids. And have like horses or something. I don't know. That felt like a threat, and that made me realize that, not all people think that women can be empowered.
Mm-hmm. Right. And are you from a smaller town, or are you from
No, my dad is from a smaller town called Ciudad Cerdán, which is not far away from here.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a town.
So so you're obviously a university student.
Yeah.
Do you do a lot of your friends from secundario or prepa, have they gotten married already, or are they also in university?
They've had kids and they've gotten married. Yeah. So,
Okay.
I mean, that's really sad for me because, I was always taught that I shouldn't, marry before I get, before getting my title, my university title. So, yeah, I don't think that women actually should be raised to have kids or to get married. Just like my dad told me when I was little. So, yeah, I don't know how to feel about it, but...
Right. But so that's, I guess, so they got married very young then?
Yeah.
Your friends?
My friends, yeah.
So do they seem happy, or do they wish that they... I know you can't speak for them, but, what is your... because that's a question, right? Is it about... I guess it's about choice, right?
Yeah.
Do they... I don't know. Do you talk to them about these sorts of things?
Yeah, a little bit, but they say that they wanted to wait a little bit, maybe because they are unprepared because, when they got married, they didn't have any money and they don't have any job because they didn't study. So, I think that they should have waited a little bit longer.
So was it family pressure or cultural pressure or social pressure? Or?
I think social pressure,
Yeah.
but also family pressure.
Okay.
And I think this is due to the stereotypes, right? For example, where I come from Zacatlán, there are too many parts around the town, other little towns around the place, where, for example, women that get married, nowadays they have to ask for permission to do something, just because they're women, and they have to ask for permission to the men, just because they are women and they are men, and we have nowadays these kind of things, right?
Okay, well, we are coming up on a break. We have a lot to talk about, right? Maybe talk more about Mexican society and how you guys see that, how you feel about that. Plenty more to talk about. International Women's Day, a little bit more history, some current events. But we are up on a pause, and we'll be right back with more Radio Culture Shock.
UPAEP, rumbo al 50 aniversario. Misión.
crear corrientes de pensamiento y formar líderes que transformen a la sociedad, en la búsqueda de la verdad, integrando fe, ciencia y vida. Valores.
Junto a la verdad, el bien y la belleza, nuestra universidad sostiene como valores rectores la dignidad de la persona humana, la libertad, la solidaridad, la subsidiariedad, la congruencia, el respeto, el amor y la justicia. Visión.
Somos una comunidad universitaria fraterna, congruente, alegre y comprometida, que es referente en la conjunción del pensamiento humanista, cristiano y las ciencias, que forma integralmente líderes con alta calidad profesional y compromiso social. Contribuye a la transformación de la sociedad con propuestas pertinentes, orientadas a la consecución del bien común. Tiene presencia e influencia en los ámbitos local, regional, nacional e internacional. Centra la gestión en la persona y optimiza los recursos al servicio de la misión institucional. Líneas rectoras.
Atreverse a vivir congruentemente nuestra identidad, como ejemplo de virtud en el servicio, con respeto y amor al prójimo, para la transformación social en orden al bien común.
Privilegiar a través de la academia la formación humanista cristiana en busca de la excelencia científica y profesional, con pensamiento universal y trascendencia social.
Crear sistemas académicos de auténtica pertinencia social, a través de la docencia, investigación y extensión, para enriquecer la cultura y participar en la solución de los problemas fundamentales del país.
Involucrarse en la formación y desarrollo intercultural de la comunidad universitaria a través de ámbitos y vínculos de internacionalización.
Lograr ambientes de confianza, colaboración y servicio, dentro de una cultura de austeridad, transparencia y evaluación. UPAEP, rumbo al 50 aniversario.
Vida de Estudiambre presenta.
So we are back with Radio Culture Shock. Thank you for staying with us. And we're going to, listen to the people, the students here at the university. Can we please see what students say in the Vox Populi?
Hola amigos de Culture Shock. Hoy vamos a hablar sobre el Día Internacional de la Mujer. Vamos a verlo. ¿Cuándo se conmemora el Día Internacional de la Mujer?
El 8 de marzo, el día de mañana.
¿Crees que en comparación con años anteriores las mujeres tienen mismas oportunidades en la actualidad que los hombres?
No, creo que ha habido una ruptura en la historia con este tema. Creo que ahorita hay muchísimo más mujeres empoderadas, más presencia en el papel y en el rol de la mujer y muchísima más dignidad en el respeto y la esencia que tiene.
¿Alguna vez has sufrido algún tipo de discriminación solo por ser mujer?
Sí, la verdad es que sí. Creo que comentarios o sí, algunas ideologías con respecto a, sí me he sentido en cierto aspecto discriminada, pero creo que es algo que tenemos que ver desde nosotras en un aspecto como mucho más valioso.
Gracias.
Hola, ¿sabes cuándo se conmemora el Día Internacional de la Mujer?
Hola, sí, mañana.
¿Sabes si hoy en día las mujeres tienen las mismas oportunidades que los hombres?
Pues en teoría se supone que sí, pero muchas veces no tenemos las mismas oportunidades que los hombres, lastimosamente.
¿Alguna vez has sufrido alguna discriminación solo por ser mujer?
Sí, bueno, muchas veces. Tristemente, todavía vivimos en una sociedad donde no tratan a las mujeres igual y las hacen de menos. Entonces me he topado con esas situaciones en la escuela, en la calle y en muchos lados.
Ok, gracias.
¿Cuándo se conmemora el Día Internacional de la Mujer?
El día de mañana, viernes 8 de marzo.
¿Qué se quiere conseguir con esta conmemoración?
Pues principalmente la igualdad de género, ya que pues la mujer juega un papel papel muy importante dentro de la sociedad y en todos los aspectos.
A comparación con años anteriores, ¿creen que las mujeres tienen en la actualidad las mismas oportunidades que los hombres?
Pues realmente no, o sea, hemos avanzado demasiado, pero realmente siento que aún falta más, pero no.
¿Tú qué piensas?
Pues a comparación de antes, siento que ahorita sí tenemos un poco más de igualdad, porque hay muchas mujeres que están trabajando, digamos que tienen muchos trabajos que hombres pues también están realizando.
Gracias.
Hola, ¿sabes cuándo se conmemora el Día Internacional de la Mujer?
Sí, se conmemora el 8 de marzo.
¿Sabes por qué se conmemora esa fecha?
Bueno, yo escuché una historia que decía que en Nueva York, en unos años atrás, había una fábrica donde trabajaban unas mujeres y en esa fábrica se supone que pusieron o ponían candados sobre las puertas para asegurarse de que las mujeres no se robaran nada. Pero hubo un incidente y empezó un incendio. Este creció y las mujeres, pues al estar como bloqueadas las puertas, no podían escapar y fallecieron, y pues por eso se conmemora ese día.
¿Por qué crees que es importante esta conmemoración?
Pues yo creo que es importante porque se busca que las mujeres tengan como mayores oportunidades, porque como se sabe anteriormente se les pagaba menos que a los hombres, no tenían como el derecho al voto y pues muchas cuestiones que las ponían en desventaja contra los hombres, y pues yo creo que es importante conmemorarlo para que se sepa que la mujer es como parte importante de la vida de todos.
Ok, gracias.
Okay, we're back from the Vox Populi, the voice of the people.
Sure.
La voz de la gente.
La voz del pueblo,
la voz del pueblo. La voz del pueblo, así es. Right, and then so that was interesting, right? One of the students did
so
know.
Really interesting answers.
Yeah, and one of the students did know about the history, right? That there was a big fire in a factory in New York City in 1911, I believe, or perhaps anyway. Some of the dates I forget, but a big fire in a factory, in a clothing factory in New York City, where a fire started and the doors were locked, right? And it was a big building. And the workers, mostly women and mostly immigrant women from Southern or Eastern Europe, were trapped inside, right? Because the doors were locked, right? And so this is important because, as we mentioned earlier, right, International Women's Day is very closely connected with workers' rights, right? Workers' rights, working condition, better wages, recognition of unions, and at that point in time, around the world, including the United States, there were many. There was a very powerful labor movement, right? And women were a part of that. So the two do go hand in hand. But there were other things that some of the students said. What did you guys notice from the?
Yeah, for example, one of the answers that caught my attention was that women suffer discrimination just for being a woman. So that's amazing, but that's not good at all, because that's incredible, right? Because we can see discrimination to a person that cannot walk, a person cannot see, but discrimination to a woman just because it's a woman, so that's incredible, right? And we can see these kind of things nowadays. I don't know, Danny, if you have seen or you have, if you have seen discrimination just for being a woman, or I don't know, you in the school, high school, elementary school.
I think that there are a lot of stereotypes for women, especially between, the elders. Because, for example, my father, when we walk down the street, I need to be at his left side all the time or on his right side all the time. But I don't have to cross, the, how do you call it? Where cars pass? I don't know.
The crosswalk?
Yeah, the crosswalk, because I can't be close to that. And also I need to be accompanied by a man all the time. And it happens to my cousins, it happens to my friends, you know. They say that a woman cannot study, you know, to be an engineer or to have a job at NASA just because she's a woman and she's not intelligent, because they say that she is emotional. Yes, we are emotional, but we can also think. I mean,
so there's some still very traditional beliefs that you yourself encounter.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. And do you think that's representative of Mexican society more generally, or?
Yeah, you know, because when I went to France, I didn't experience that kind of, you know, treatment. You know, I was just like a part of their family. I was a woman, and that was it. That's the only characteristic that I have. But here, for example, if I travel to Ciudad Cerdán, I can walk alone if I don't have a man. So, you know, because they say that you are, you know, the women that dedicate themselves to sell their bodies, or that can sit on a specific places.
Stereotypes.
Yeah, and I, you know, always I have to be with a man.
And in fact, this day, March 8th, it has to be, the women has to be recognized because their work, because there are things that they do for a better life. Because, well, the stereotypes that we have, for example, here in Mexico, and it's really common, is that women are recognized only because they are mothers, they are sisters, they are grandmoms, but they are not recognized by because their job, because their important role in the society in general. So this day, March 8th, tries to see these important facts like clear to all the people in Mexico, right?
And I think it's important, right? I think a lot of these things that you guys are mentioning, right? If we can think about like how society is structured, right? Whether it's a tradition, right? Whether it's sort of a traditional social structure or religious structure or whatever it may be, right? That these things are difficult to change because they're so ingrained in us, right? Yeah. You're raised to either wear pink or blue or something, right? And how do you, and if that's what you've been, you and everybody around you's been taught because the previous generation did it that way, then it's very difficult to change these things, right? But obviously that doesn't mean we shouldn't try, right? I mean, so the way these things are sort of built into the structure of society, right? But back to what you guys were talking about Mexico. So you're from Zacatlan, really?
Right.
And so you're from a small town. Do you see do you notice similar things as Danny?
Yeah, and I have seen it. Zacatlan is a town, but I can say that it's a little city.
Okay.
Around the little city, there are communities, little communities. And it's incredible seeing, as I mentioned before, women has to ask for permission to hang out with their friends. If women are in a party, they have to ask for permission because it's bad seeing women drinking something, a beer, a tequila, whiskey. That's not good scene in this kind of society because the little towns they have the how can I say it? The culture that they have, it's because it was taught by their families of, you know, their grandmoms and the family from the past. So we can see these kind of things in these little towns. But I think that in cities, like for example in Puebla, in Mexico, that's not that, it's not that, how can I say it?
It's not that common, actually.
It's not that common, actually, right.
So when you both came to Puebla for school?
I was born here.
Oh, you were born here. So going to Ciudad Cerdán is very different for you than having grown up in Puebla.
Sure. You know, in Puebla, I feel, you know, not safe, of course, because of the feminicides and everything. But in Ciudad Cerdán, I feel threatened all the time by men because they always catcall you. So.
Okay, so that's interesting, right? So there are always questions of safety that you're aware of in a city, but you feel more threatened in Ciudad Cerdán when you visit that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So and catcalling. So does that not happen as much in Puebla? Or?
It does happen, but in Ciudad Cerdán is like they keep staring at you, or I don't know, they keep calling you names, and they say that you know, the most common thing that I've heard is "I'm gonna marry you," And it's like,
Okay.
okay, sure.
I don't want.
Thank you, next. Like Ariana Grande said.
Thank you, next. Okay. So,
Yeah. Oh, and also, I remember when I was in elementary school, I used to play soccer with my friends. And it's incredible because now that I remember, there were some women that wanted to play soccer. But my friends, my little friends, my close friends, they said, no, you cannot play soccer because you're a woman. This sport is for men. And I remember that this happened to me because I saw it. And yeah, so these kind of things that, that you know, that comes together and you say, no, this cannot happen anymore. So that's what this day tries to avoid.
and getting back, so these are this, and we might want to come back to some of these observations, right? Looking at some statistics, right? And so thinking about, growing up and what it's like, you know, to be out and about in a city or a small town, right? But some of the statistics that we have here, right? Do we know, so statistically, about 50% of women around the world have a paid job, right? Do we know, what do we think about how much they're paid comparatively to men?
Just less, you know, because here it says that they earn between 10% and 30% less than men for doing the same job.
Right. And that's interesting, right? For doing the same job, right? So, which is, I mean, you hear that, I don't know if you hear something similar in Spanish, but in English, it's, you know, equal pay for equal work, or I forget exactly what the phrase is. Sometimes I forget my English, right? But is that common to hear in Mexico as well, or you know, equal pay for equal work?
It's supposed to happen, but of course it doesn't happen at all the times because, you know, for example, when my mother came to find a job, they offered her 2,000 pesos. But the job that my father had, you know, they worked at the same place. So, but my father was getting paid 4,000 pesos at the time. So, you know, they were doing the same job, but my mother was, you know, earning a little bit less just because she was a woman. And the boss said to her that, you know, you are a woman. If you get pregnant, I really need to pay you less because maybe you are going to get married and have kids and everything. So I am not going to risk it.
Or just women, they don't get a job because just they're women. So that happened.
Yeah, not just being paid less, or, well, I would rather not hire you because you could, and that's I think something that is slowly starting to change anyway. I mean, or maybe changing more rapidly in certain places than others. But that question of childbirth and leaving the job and having other obligations, right? And obviously, the job is still the same, right? And those sorts of contingencies that the employer puts on are simply not just, right? And then getting to education, right? There are 39 million girls and young women in the world who are not enrolled in school or are denied a secondary education, right? So thinking about education and jobs, right? I mean, you mentioned some of your friends who got married, never went to school. So right? I mean, what is the? I mean, and how do you guys see this playing out in Mexican society at all?
Yeah. You know, because there are a lot of teenagers that are getting married, but also because they didn't receive sexual education.
Okay.
I think that's the thing. That's, you know, the main point.
Okay, so also sex ed and learning about, basic.
Basic stuff.
Yeah, and also because the stereotypes. For example, in these little communities, women, they cannot study because they have to dedicate to only and specifically to the home, to the house. And also men, they have to work, and women, they have to dedicate to house, so they don't have to study. So these kind of stereotypes are happening also nowadays, and more in these kind of communities.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that. I'm reminded, right, of what the quote we read from Charlotte Perkins Gilliam, right? So a woman's duty may be centered in her home, and motherhood. I mean, there are some biological realities, right? But home, right, should mean the whole country and not be confined to 3 or 4 rooms in a city or a state, right? That there's a lot of things are more connected than simply some sort of biological role or something like that. Were you told, Danny, that you could only study certain things in school? Did your teachers?
No, they didn't. You know,
Okay.
I think they were a little bit more revolutionary, but my family did actually.
Okay.
You know, they said that, you know, if your boyfriend husband dies, you can never get married, or if you are enrolled with a man, then you shouldn't have, you know,
Right.
the thing. Yeah,
Okay.
and
So
also,
certain expectations.
yeah,
and
to
certain-
keep myself at home, basically.
Yeah, and I think this happened because the kind of education, for example, our parents, or in my case, my grandmom, she has this kind of mentality, and I respect that because it's the way she was educated. So I cannot say anything because okay, I respect that, right? It was because the time, because the education that it was at that time. So yeah, they have this kind of mentality, and yeah, we can see it also nowadays, just as you said.
Yeah. And also, you know, but I think, you know, elderly people, you know, they are the ones that, of course, carry information and carry, how do you say, traditions, I'm going to say. Yeah, you know, for example, yesterday I was talking with my grandmother, and she said, well, you know, depression can be cured just because you're a woman. How's that? Yeah, you need to have control over your body. Okay, thank you, Grandma. So I think stereotypes, and just because I'm a woman, I'm not allowed to have depression or anxiety or something. You know, basic beliefs.
The expectation that the women
Don't get sad,
Mhm.
basically.
Right. Yeah, and you always have to have a happy face, right? And,
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah. And so I mean, and there I mean, plenty of other stereotypes to confront. And interesting about I mean, and the attempt, right, of International Women's Day, sort of as an organized event, right? Each year they have a theme, right? Last year it was Press for Progress, right? This year it was Balance for Better, right? So I mean, there's this snappy, right? I mean, so we can, I mean, it sounds like it could be just sort of hashtag activism, right? But they have suggestions on how to, confront, right? Stereotypes, right? And how to, you know, think about goals, right? So for example, last year in 2018, the theme was Press for Progress, and they write, individually we're one drop, right? But together we're an ocean. Commit to a quote unquote gender parity mindset via progressive action. Let's all collaborate to accelerate gender parity, so our collective action powers equality worldwide. Okay, so that sounds really nice, but then, you know, you say, well, what do we do? But then they have some suggestions, right? So, I mean, so what are some of the suggestions they give for, you know, how we can press forward for progress?
Well, they say that to maintain a gender parity mindset and to, you know, challenge stereotypes and bias, as we always said, to forge positive visibility of women, you know, to identify ways to make women more visible, you know, recognized by society, also to influence others' beliefs and actions, and to celebrate women's achievements. So I think that's a pretty good idea, but I don't know how we're going to do it.
Right. So those are so that's sort of then their list of ideas or goals or something, right?
Yeah.
But then for each of them, they get more specific, right? So gender parity. What do we mean by that?
I don't understand that, but
Okay.
it's
so gender.
Gender, yeah.
So gender parity like being equal, right? Like, so a balance, right, between, you know, percentages, right? I think, if I'm not mistaken, sort of the general idea would be that, you know, if women are half of society and men are half of society, then, you know, demographically, just then the workforce should probably reflect that, right? Then 50-50, if that's how the population is distributed, that should be the goal. So if we're not hearing from, if you know, maybe at a town meeting, right, or you know, there's some sort of hearing in the city hall about some issue, right, and citizens are invited to participate, and if everybody being called on, so they call on 5 men and only 1 woman, well, maybe they should call on 3 men and 3 women, right, and to. So when women aren't being allowed to or asked to participate, right, question that, right? Like why, you know, so we've heard from 5 men on this issue, why can't we hear from 5 women, right? So that idea of parity, right? Or, you know, finding ways that, alternatives that can be more inclusive to have greater numbers, right? Also, you know, nominating women for opportunities, right? So, and looking for those when those opportunities present themselves to say, okay, so let's, again, 50-50, that should be the goal, that balance. But we're right up on a pause, we're right up on a break here. We'll continue our conversation after the break, and this is Radio Culture Shock.
¿Te gustaría crear o mejorar dispositivos para el servicio de seres vivos, tales como prótesis, órtesis e instrumental biomédico? ¿Qué estás esperando? La Escuela de Ingeniería Biónica de la UPAEP te invita a conocer cómo un ingeniero biónico domina y aplica las habilidades de elementos mecánicos, electrónicos y biológicos en las personas. Conoce nuestro plan de estudios conformado por 9 cuatrimestres con líneas terminales en diseño y manufactura de prótesis, emprendedores e instrumentación biomédica, con un campo de trabajo que va desde el sector salud, automotriz y aeroespacial. Para más información, comunícate al teléfono 229-9400, extensión 7146, o consulta la página www.upaep.mx. Ingeniería biónica, calidad de vida en tus manos. Hazlo tuyo. Hazlo UPAEP.
Soy de Tlaxcala, amo la naturaleza y disfruto mucho leer. Estudio administración de empresas y elegí hacerlo en UPAEP, porque aquí combino una excelente preparación con aquello que es mi gran pasión, ayudar a la gente. Mi historia comienza aquí. Descúbrela en upaep.mx/soy UPAEP. Soy Alexandra y soy UPAEP.
El sonido de lo natural está de vuelta. No te pierdas todos los martes en punto de las 13 horas tu programa BIOS. Con nuevas secciones, entrevistas, enlaces telefónicos, transmisiones en vivo y mucho más. BIOS, el sonido de lo natural está de vuelta. No te lo pierdas, todos los martes en punto de las 13 horas.
Well, we are back, and well, just to continue with the topic we are discussing, also it's important, and I think one of the most important topics is to challenge stereotypes. Mm-hmm. It's just what we were talking about, and well, what it means. First, question assumptions about women, right? Also challenge statements that limit women. For example, just like a long time ago, that women were only recognized because they could be mothers, they could be sisters, they could be in charge of the home. Mm-hmm. So, to challenge these kind of statements and to ask more questions about it. Also, always use inclusive language. And nowadays, this is like an interesting topic because inclusive language, it's not only for this, nowadays it's for everything, right? Mm-hmm. Work to remove barriers to women's progress and buy from retailers who position women in positive ways. So I think this is really important, just to could challenge the stereotypes, to ask to ourselves some questions, and to recognize women for too many things.
Yeah, I think that last one is interesting that you mentioned that, right? So if you see a brand of clothing or something that, or really any type of product, right, that perpetuates stereotypes, right, or a stereotypical role of a woman as, you know, always a mother, right, a mother before, right, before her job, right, or you know, I'm thinking of advertisements for like cleaning products, right? Oh, you know, the mother knows best how to clean the house, and you know, all these things, right? You know, that sort of advertisement, right, perpetuates these things, right? Perpetuates the stereotype that, oh, it's, well, the woman is typically the one who cleans, right? Oh, and isn't it funny or nice that the husband decided to help out once or twice, right?
Okay.
so I mean, if you're seeing advertisements that perpetuate these stereotypes, to be sort of aware of that, right? And it's, you mentioned the inclusive language thing too, because and that's always interesting how to do that, right? Have you noticed in Spanish what people do instead of, like, how to confront that these days, right? If you're writing something down, like normally you would say, like, I'm writing an email to my students, I'd say, muy buenos días, alumnos, right? What could I do instead?
Alumnos y alumnas.
I could do alumnos y alumnas. What else could I do?
You know, if you want to, you know, with a friend or something, you can say alumnes.
Okay.
With an E or an X.
Or an X.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that it's becoming popular now with the arroba, right? Because it's, I don't know how you call that in English. I can't remember. But the A inside of the circle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the O and the as and the...
And, well, it's important to say that for linguistics, that's not
not possible.
That's not possible. In fact,
okay, so you guys are...
I can say that I can get angry with,
really? Okay.
with the, yeah. For example, alumnes with the E, that couldn't happen.
Okay.
Because you're challenging the language, and the
Okay.
language is, and it is, right? And we cannot just move the letters and change letters because we want.
Why not?
That's not possible. The letters in the words, right? But yeah, that's correct. These kind of things are happening, and we cannot avoid it.
So a linguistical perspective. So is that, that might be, because you say from a linguistic perspective, we can't do that.
We can do it because we do it.
We can do it because we do it.
I don't do it, but well, to
Okay.
generalize, we
Okay.
do it.
So
But it's not good.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay.
Right? To talk in another topic.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll have to discuss linguistics.
Sure.
If Alan were here, I would wonder what, because does he teach a linguistics course, or
I
he teaches
think he
morphosyntaxis.
morphosyntaxis,
And yep,
which would be
I think
connected,
so.
obviously. So that would be interesting to get his take on that,
Yeah.
on the same sort of thing. But so that theme, right, of Press for Progress was the hashtag, right, for last year's International Women's Day. But, as we're seeing, right, this is more than just sort of a hashtag activism. They're trying to encourage people to look for ways to modify just a little thing in their everyday life, right? But what is the theme for this year?
What is the theme for this year?
In 2019.
Can I go back? Balance for better.
Balance for better. And so what do we mean by that?
Balance for better. Well, it's basically the future is exciting. Let's build a gender balanced world. It's what we were discussing. Basically, if we want to be equal, if the genders, men and women want to be like in the same page, we have to recognize women for their job, for the things they do, and not only for the stereotypes. And also we have to give credit for that. And men have to recognize that. As we were mentioning, men were more empowered than women a long time ago, but right now that's happening. So that's happening, but we have to avoid that. So I think that's the main perspective of Balance for Better for the future. And we're gonna start right now
with ourselves, I think.
Right.
Yeah, and they make the point, pretty strongly that that it's not just on International Women's Day, right? To maybe this brings our awareness, and maybe we can start to make those changes in our everyday lives, working towards the future, right? And they make an interesting point, right? That it's not balance between in the workplace isn't just a women's issue, right? It's a business issue, right? If your business is better representative of society and demographics in society, then it will probably be a better business, right?
Yeah.
And over here it says something really interesting. We notice its absence and celebrate its presence. And it's what is happening right now. For example, March 8th, instead, I was looking for some information, I was watching some images, and instead giving roses to women, instead, congratulate women for the day, let's start respect women because what they are. Let's start being equal. Let's start to try everyone as human, right? So I think this statement is really interesting.
So you were further ahead in the script before. I apologize for bringing us back. So you were looking at some of the other things going on around the world today that we wanted to talk about, and important movements, important issues. I mean, what can we mention in those terms?
Well, for example, here in Mexico, they want to make awareness of feminicide. I think we all know the definition, but just to say at least that feminicide is a sex-based hate crime term broadly defined as the intentional killing of females, women, or girls because they are females. And, I've seen in Mexican society that most, assassins or murderers, they were actually victimized by a woman, by probably their own mother. I've done some research and I've seen it on every day because women, the mothers, they say you have to act like a man. You don't have to if a woman is bad to you, you have to respond and you have to, keep her in a place. So that's really sad that mothers, being women, actually are perpetrating some kind of crime, some kind of hate crime towards men.
I mean, I think we want to be maybe careful in assigning causality, but I think you're right to point out that there is right that the larger social structures, right, that and expectations, right, and those it doesn't matter. If you're a man or woman, you can play an equal role in perpetuating certain cultural practices, right? And it is, but it is a particular problem here in Mexico and throughout Latin America, right? Feminicide, and questions of definition, right? What statistically counts as a feminicide, right? Because not all governments count them the same way, and what gets what is marked right in the books as a feminicide, and what is not, right? So the governments and the official statistics can sort of affect the way we think about these things, right? No, it's going down. Well, it could be that they changed the definition or who gets tabulated, right?
In Mexico, I think it was in 2010 or 2011 that it was most of the time the feminicide was in the north of the country, in Ciudad Juárez. Sure. In fact, there were too many news about it. In fact, there are movies. There are too many things, and we can see some information about this because in Ciudad Juárez was happening these kind of issues, and it was really, really bad because the feminicide was really, really high.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But now it's all over the country, actually. And, my mother said that before in Puebla, nothing existed like that. She was born here in Puebla. Mm-hmm. And she said that everyone respected women, supposedly. But now they are just appearing, female murderers here. And that makes us question, it actually existed, or is it something that is actually going on to light? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting too, right? statistics that we found in the website some of the websites that we were looking at, right? The way in which the statistics are presented as well, right? So if you do it per capita, right, then Mexico is not very high on the list, right? Because Mexico has a very large population. But in absolute, so you know, so the data that we had was for 2016 and 2017, and you have countries such as El Salvador and Honduras at the top of the list because they're calculating it in terms of population, right? But if we look at absolute numbers, which, I mean, there are different reasons for doing, but there are still that same data, right? Brazil had 1,133 feminicides, right? And Mexico 760, right, for that data, which is still like a staggering number, right, in absolute terms, right?
Yeah, more than 3 feminicides, I believe, if we make them numbers, a week. Mm-hmm. That's really sad.
Right. And then we're back to our question about definition, right? So if the police or the government decides this is a feminicide or not, right? And there are easy ways to change the numbers, right? By changing the definition and what have you, right? So numbers are always tricky, but I mean but we're still left with these numbers, which are really shocking.
Sure.
But so and you mentioned earlier in the show that, as you just mentioned now, right, about Puebla and Puebla being safe, and so in your growing up here in Puebla, and I mean, do you feel that there's been a change in your lifetime?
Yes, actually, because, you know, there were not feminicides. I never heard in my entire life, you know, when I started being awake about, you know, my society and my surroundings, I realized that the only person getting, you know, murdered was a man. And that's it. That's what I thought. But then, you know, right now I think it's a little bit more recently, when 2012, with the appearance of our ex-governor, Rafael Moreno Valle, that it actually started, you know, feminicides. I've heard that there was one in 1 month, and then another one in like maybe 2 weeks after. I was 14. So I don't know if it was because he actually started to, you know, advertise the people that there were feminicides, and the other government didn't, you know, made aware of this.
Yeah, and then that's an important point. Like, what is made available? What information does the public have? And do people know? Yeah,
because they say that before they were labeled as accidents, not as murderers or feminicides. So,
which is a very different term.
Sure,
terminology.
Huge difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so and this is, so we're nearing the end of the show here, the end of our hour. Other things that you guys wanted to mention before we go?
Well, I would like to say that nowadays we are in progress. We are not done, and as we know that we have just to respect each other as humans, right? But what is true is that women nowadays, they are not recognized as they are for the job, for the things they do, and well, there are a lot of places where they are respected for this, but there are a lot of places too where they are not respected for that. So just respect each other.
Okay. Well, I think that we have to respect ourselves before we start to respect others, and to change ourselves before changing others. That's what I'm going to say.
Okay. All right, and I guess I will end with a quote from Gloria Steinem, who was a famous feminist, right, journalist and activist, who wrote that the story of women's struggle for equality belongs to no single feminist nor any one organization, right, but to the collective efforts of all who care about human rights, right, and I think that's to make that connection, right, between women's rights and human rights, right. I mean, they go hand in hand, and I guess that's it for this week's episode of Culture Shock. We'll be back next week with Alan and a guest. But I'm your faculty host, Nathaniel.
I am your student host, Daniela.
Your student host, Willie.
And we will see you next week.
Next week.
Thanks for listening.